Next is Q&A with University of Tennessee Haslam School of Business experts.
Three speakers here with us that you just watched. So welcome Heidi, Ben, and William. We've gotten some great Q&A from our panel today, so we are dying to hear more about your expertise. I think the first question that we should start off with is, what if your workplace culture is actively against innovative ideas? I know, William, you talked a lot about putting in the work and accepting some of those innovative ideas and all the different pieces and parts that need to be in place. But what if you've got some cultural elements that are actively working against it?
So that's a tough one. But what I would argue is the strategy is to innovate small instead of innovating big in terms of getting a lot of spotlight, getting a lot of heat, and a lot of eyeballs for big activities. Go small, do little things, small continuous improvements in an innovative way. And then over time, you can see those pile up. And then that's where you get your proof to gain willing converts, to ask to allow people to come along. So my strategy would be, don't go big, go small, get some wins, proof it out, show value, demonstrate the capability, and then you have a greater chance of having people convert and become allies in your innovative strategies going forward.
That's a great insight. And I think, Heidi, when we look at how you can get those small wins and then balancing that with ethics, where do you see sort of the tension there happening for people that are trying to navigate that process?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think of some of the examples that I gave and some of the natural tension that may come up. So maybe a specific example, just going to a real life example, when you're doing a source evaluation board and you're training some of those technical folks, maybe, for example, a small win may be using that tool for your toolbox that I gave in my presentation, in a sense of explain it in a real world way, put it in front of them in the, hey, answer these questions. If you were on the front of the newspaper, how would it make you feel? So maybe doing it in that question form or in a way that is real world to them, and doing some training. To me, that's kind of real win, and that ties into innovation always, to me, in the sense of training. So if you can train and make some converts out of some of your technical folks, to me, that's always a great win. And then you've got those advocates on your side, and then you can, like William said, you can spread that elsewhere. So I would say that that's probably a really good way to use a small win and an innovation, is maybe do some training with some of your technical folks on a source evaluation board, and both parties are better off. And then they'll be your advocates when they go back to their group.
Right, because I know one of the key challenges is making sure everything is fair and transparent. And so Ben, when I think about building those advocates, that's really where your top cover, your leadership buy-in can come in. So what do you think that leaders need to hear from those advocates, or need to hear from those small wins? What kind of things will help them buy into those?
Well, I think that's the building on both the input from William and from Heidi. It's the momentum that is gained from these small wins and the learning how your organization learns to move forward. It's not exactly the same in any scenario. And so everybody likes to think they're special. In some cases, and as we talk about these type of aspects, we are. And so from a leadership standpoint, from that top management support standpoint of how do we move forward, how does our organization need to learn, how do we grow it, how do we plant that seed and nurture and culture it along, and I think that's what you do. You take the small wins, you let the momentum build within the organization, you pay attention to how your particular organization learned and is able to move forward, and are they ready? Right? Because not every organization is ready to move at the same pace as we go forward. So I think you have to kind of take those into account. A lot of it comes down to the oldie but goodie, is that the ability to share information and communicate amongst our teams. And that will tell you more just by listening and paying attention to the details of the successes in those small small wins will tell you where you need to go as you move forward.
Yeah, that's absolutely true. I know that having worked in some of those environments myself, that sometimes there's that middle management piece, right? In the middle of the people who are actually executing the work and your leadership that would be happy to buy into the innovation, but maybe there's some people in between, some layers in between that might prevent you from building that advocacy. Any tips or pointers on not how to work around the chain of command, but perhaps different ways of building that advocacy between the layers?
So Jenny, one of the strategies I would recommend is understanding what motivates the middle layer and doing, kind of on some level, doing an assessment of what their motivations and incentives are. The middle layer, just by the very nature of its middle layer, has been birthed in the existing infrastructure, and they have vested interest in how the existing infrastructure works. So in order to shift from that, there has to be a compelling vision to move to something different and an associated set of incentives and motivations that allow that to happen. I think by identifying what that middle layer is, what their pain points are, and then providing Tylenol for it, whatever that is, whatever that need is, whatever they're looking for, because the middle is looking to be the top. So there's some motivation there. So finding out what that motivation is, identifying it, and then framing solutions that are supportive of those aspirations.
Yeah, that's a great point. That's a great point. So what's the best way, Heidi, do you think, when you're navigating between getting the job done and finding those pain points for that middle layer, what do you think is the right sort of balance between the two?
Well, I would say that part of it is bringing them to the table. Quite honestly, if they are the right fit to be there, to be that layer, and to have that level of RAA, responsibility, to be in that position, then I would say bring them to the table. Not for everything, but you've got to bring them to the table enough that there's buy-in and that they have some ownership for what it is, whether it's a problem or to do a continuous improvement or to do something else, and to align to the vision of what you're trying to accomplish. And maybe it's ownership over the vision for their own department. So I would say that probably is one of the biggest things, is that when I see middle management become disenfranchised from top leadership, it's normally because they don't have a voice, or they're not at the table. They don't have that ownership piece. So that would be my biggest recommendation, is if they're meant to be there and they're the right team member to be there, then bring them to the table. Not on everything, but bring them to the table on something that's critical, that's important to them and important to you, and give them the ownership to do it. That's the biggest way to get buy-in and to get motivation, quite frankly, is that level of folks. They want to own something. They want to produce the results for you, or they wouldn't be there. And that also gives you the proof in the pudding, if you will, of who's ready to move beyond and to go to the next level. And that'll help them be motivated themselves and motivate their team to move forward on that project.
Right. That's an excellent point. A lot of middle management is eager to advance their career. And if you're providing them an innovative solution that can help them do that, I would think that would generate a lot of buy-in. Yeah, that's a great point. So another question from our Q&A is, how do you know when to flex and how far to bend? There are people that will never deviate from the standard. So Ben, this sounds like your wheelhouse.
That's a really hard question, right? In that there are two aspects to it. There are especially within DoD, within the Air Force community, and others, there are standards that have to be met. And there may be safety standards, there may be security standards. There are many avenues that we don't necessarily want to talk about flexibility in the same context of how we're going to maintain safe environments and doing the right thing. so we get locked into one way of thinking, and that we have to maintain the standards. We cannot stray, we cannot change, and we take that same type of mentality and we carry it over to other aspects, and then we're often surprised that we don't get the type of outcome that we would like to find. And so it does takes thought. Let's sit down and look at what areas can we move, can we change, can we adapt, can we flex as we look at the world going on around us. And I think it ties into the last question, I think, very well, in that many times it's not the things that got you here that are going to take you into the future. And so sitting down and thinking about things a different way, where can we be flexible? Is it a matter of this is the way we've always done it? Or is it a matter of is this the way it really must be done? And so we often forget to ask that question. We let our assumptions get in the way of that very first step in thinking about how we're going to be more flexible and how we're going to adjust to the future. And that's what are our assumptions? What does the current situation look like? And how do we need to move forward from here? And when we skip ahead immediately to the change part, because everyone loves change, especially change that they don't understand. If we jump immediately into that pot, the resistance will be, well, we can't do that, right? And so now you find yourself in that fighting a standard, or what's assumed to be a standard, when what you really need to do is talk about what you can do differently. So I hope that I eventually got to the answer to your question.
And Jenny, if I can jump in on that and tying it back to ethics, because I think that that's one of the, especially in our line of work, that's one of the places where folks unfortunately ask us to flex. And sometimes they're asking us to flex for the wrong reasons. And sometimes it's a miscommunication. And so I think that there's places where it's very black and white. When it's an unethical, immoral, illegal, to me, that's, black and white. But I have also found that a lot of times it is miscommunication. And when I have groups of folks that work for me, I like to tell them, as Dr. Skipper just said, don't jump to the no. I used to actually challenge folks, and I continue to do this when, work for me, especially like young managers and, teams and stuff. Don't say no first. That, just, you might think that there's a reg or there's an easy answer or something. Don't say no. When you're providing customer service to that technical person and you're trying to help them with an acquisition, don't jump to the no. Always ask them first, what is their goal? And it may look like it's an ethical question or something that isn't easy. They're asking you to flex. However, if you start back and you go back to the beginning and you say, what is the goal of what you're trying to accomplish? You may actually figure out that you can quote unquote flex. What you really find is that you have a more efficient answer, but you have to ask the right question to get there. So, for example, if you have a young contract specialist or somebody and the technical person calls up and they, say they sent you a bad scope of work, because that never happens, it just never happens. So they send you a bad scope of work and you can't really do a procurement or acquisition for them. And there's this tension, between them. If the contract specialist were to just kind of back up and say, and I've had this happen to me countless times, or my team, and you say, wait, tell me what the goal is. Start at the beginning. What are you trying to achieve? What do you need? Oh, wait a minute. I don't even need a scope of work. Let's not try and jump over the process or do something weird here or flex in some process way, some unofficial way. What I'm hearing you say is you actually need Y. I thought you were going after X with a scope of work. Guess what? I have an existing blanket. I can get you Y in a release. We can get this done in 5 days. So that's kind of what I would say is it's not necessarily always a question of flex or not. It's a question of aligning the goals from the beginning, because you may find out you have a more efficient answer and you don't actually have to flex. You could just go down a different road. So sorry to jump on that, but I just think
that's perfect. That's exactly what we're
things.
Yeah, because I know within, organizations like the Air Force Research Lab, there's a real push to get capability to the warfighter faster. And you can either find that in industry or you can find it in the lab or somewhere in between. But unless you have those contracting professionals working as part of your team, it's gonna be really hard to come up with partnership agreements. It's gonna be really hard to buy the products. And so I think it's really important what you just said about not jumping to the no, right? And I understand I think it's a problem in every industry. I don't think it's limited to just DoD contracting. I
That's
think
absolutely
it's true
correct.
everywhere.
Yeah, and that's an important note. When we talk about flexibility, it's often assumed that we're going to relax some type of standard, and that doesn't necessarily be the case, or that we're going to do something that we ought not to do. It may be just exactly as Heidi mentioned, is that there's just a different way of thinking that might get us to either the same or better place than we thought we needed to be, and that's the it is sometimes assumed that that means that we're going to do something shady. We're going to try to go around a rule rather than trying to find a better solution. And so that's a great point that Heidi made there, and that's not necessarily what it means. There's just a different way of getting to the place that we would like to go.
Right, right. William, what are you thinking about in terms of flex and as it relates to bringing in new innovations? Because I thought Ben's point about it not relaxing a standard is an important one.
Yeah, as everyone was talking, my mind was landing on 2 points. The first is the one that I think everyone touched on a little bit. It's the appropriate application of flexibility. It's like, let's find the right targets. So it's target acquisition from a standpoint of flexibility. But the second, for me and my experiences have always been that flexibility is a team sport. Okay, when you think about it, as soon as you hear the words, I want you to flex versus we are ready to flex, those are 2 different conversations. That's a shared risk environment when we are seeking flexibilities. So everybody has a little bit to play, has a little, is giving a little bit and has a little risk in the pot. So then when we are taking the flexibility journey, that's a much better strategy. And I'm sure you all have heard this phrase. I've heard it tons in my career. Step out on a limb. Go ahead, step out on a limb. Come on out on the limb. And that's great until you look back at the tree and someone's out there with a saw. So you got to be very careful about how much limb stepping out, you do by yourself. I think when we do this as a collaborative effort and everyone has shared responsibility, shared risk, then the environment fosters some great flexibilities because collectively we can identify where are the places that, yeah, we can bend a little bit, and then where are the places that, no, that's a brick wall. It's not worth our time and energy to focus on that space.
That's a great point, and it's hard enough to do that within the walls or within the lines of our own organization on the org chart. Now, if we take that and expand it out across a supply chain perspective, where we have to our customers, and our suppliers, and whatnot, and up and down the chain, that same rule applies, right? In that we very often want to dictate to our partners that they take the risk and they demonstrate flexibility, but we're going to live by our rules and you guys just do what we say, and then we wonder why maybe it doesn't work out, or it becomes a lot more expensive than we thought it might, and so that's a difficult. It's an easy thing to sit here and theoretically talk about. It is a much more difficult thing to actually do and put into execution, largely because we get caught in our old mindsets. But the way we've always done it, and the way we've always expected things to happen. And so what we find more and more in the research project that we worked in and in everyday life, especially in times that we're in right now, is that if we don't start with an internal thought process of how can we adjust and be more flexible to the environment that we're in right now, how can we expect our partners to do the same? And it's a small world after all. We are all in this fight together, And so me increasing my flexibility that just passes the buck up and down the chain one notch is not going to get us to the long-term solution that we need to be in.
Absolutely. And I think the shared risk concept is a fantastic one, because we find, when we're getting people together to collaborate, right? Everybody's eager to collaborate as long as their definition of collaboration means you're going to do it my way. Right? And then when they find out that's not necessarily what collaboration means, we get a little uncomfortable, and maybe we aren't going to give as much as we thought we were going to give. So no, that's a really interesting approach to a team, to building that team, and understanding that it's not just about your way of doing things, but it's about understanding the risk you're asking of others and finding out sort of what their currency is, right? No, that's a great point. Love that discussion. Another question we have from the audience is, how does inspiration translate to procurement when that is all that one has? So it's kind of, it feels very philosophical. But how does it translate? How does inspiration translate to procurement when that can sometimes feel like a very uninspired environment sometimes?
So Jenny, I think that may be an extension of my earlier conversation. So I'll dive in first. I have this belief, and it is informed by 26 years of experience in the craft, that acquisition and specifically contracting is half art, half science. It's about 50-50. So there are some rules, there's some regulations, there's some policies, some guidance, some best practices, and then the application of those. So the rules and regs and guidance and policy are the science. It's somewhat bedrock. Okay, you do these things, you turn the crank, the same thing outcome should come out every time. The application of those are the science. And that's where the individual mindsets come in, because I have seen individuals in the same environment using the same strategies, tactics, and tools come out with very completely different outcomes, and in terms of deploying the strategies, tactics, tools, regulations, and guidance. So from a standpoint of inspiration, I think that's an internal piece. That's on the art side, in my opinion. That is truly on the art side of how are you embracing, the phrase I often use is program empathy. How am I deploying my craft in support of the thing I'm trying to accomplish, or the customer, the client, the program I'm trying to serve? That is all inspiration, okay? I also believe, I've heard this saying too, if there is something that you want to do, there's something in the regulation that will allow it to happen, okay? If there's something you don't want to do, there's something in the regulation that will also allow that to happen. So it's personal. In my opinion, it's personal. So that inspiration, a large part of that is leadership, vision. Why are we here? To whom do we serve? Why do we deploy our craft in a certain manner? It's half art, half science. And I think it's that science in that art piece, it's where the innovation shows up. And I don't believe it is paint by numbers from a standpoint of delivering value. Inspiration can be there, and you can use that inspiration to deliver extraordinary value and unlock extraordinary value in the system.
And if I can jump into what he was saying, I feel for the person that asked that question. And if they were my team member, using what William said, what I would probably do or instruct or recommend to that team member is, it doesn't sound like they own or they're embodied in what they're procuring. And my guess is there's coolness and there's great mission in what they're procuring. So my first recommendation, and what I love to do with team members, is, it's harder now in today's COVID world, but let's say they were buying lab supplies. I'd send them to the lab. Understand why buying test tubes in a lot is so important for blood samples. If you get down there and you physically can see it, you get it, you understand it. The questions about, buying them in lots don't become trivial or aggravating anymore. You get it. Not only that, you form the relationships with the customers and the people that your partners that you're buying it with. So that to me is, I think what I'm hearing in that question is, in going along with what William's saying is that get the inspiration in the relationships and the procurement. You need, it sounds to me like that person needs to know more and be invested in what they're procuring. So ask for, say, hey boss, I want to learn more about what I am procuring. Let me learn more about it. And even if it's doing some sort of Zoom call, unfortunately, or if they can go and go to wherever they're doing it, if it's buying stuff for war fighting, oh my gosh, how important is that? Let them go have a 45-minute session and get a technical explanation. They don't have to become the expert. They just become invested in that item or that service of whatever that they're procuring. And those questions and the discussions between them and their partners of who they're supporting then don't become aggravating anymore or tension filled. They get it, they understand. And I have always found that to be so beneficial, because not only are they invested, they create the relationships, but they become so much more excited about finding better ways to procure those services and those items. Be like, oh, I get it now, and I'm gonna find a better thing. I'm gonna find not only a better price, because then I can buy them more, or now I get it, and I got a better idea. Now I'm gonna explain it. So immerse, and if their boss isn't immersing them, ask for it.
Yeah,
I
that's
think
great insight.
both
Ben?
comments are right into leadership and culture, right? I mean, and it's so easy in the big world that we live in to say, well, the universe is against me and they won't allow me to do these things. And what we often forget is that culture starts in the office, in at your desk, at whatever sphere of influence that you have, to be able to make that type of change. And both examples, Heidi provides some excellent examples of even at the most local level that you could possibly be, in ways that you could affect that change and build that buy-in. And William mentioned the empathy of understanding, and just why is what I do important, and how do I fit into the bigger picture, and how am I helping my customer, and why am I here? All of those are pretty deep questions, right? But they start with the now, with the today, with the next thing that you're doing. And if we can take those little steps in any field, not just in the acquisitions and contracting space, but we see the tremendous impact, the tremendous differences that can be made by having that relationship and being in the moment, if you will, mindful of what it is that you're doing and why, can have such a tremendous impact for later.
And I would think too, if you're doing the work like this now, right, before something like COVID hits or a volcano erupts, right, then you're baking in those elements to your plan that you were talking about, Ben, in terms of that's how you're going to be able to flex quickly, is if you have sort of that contingency plan or that plan about how you're going to deal with it. And so I would imagine that building those relationships for things like that seem fairly trivial or that don't seem like a big deal now end up becoming pivotal to put your plan into action.
They certainly do. And when we talk about flexibility or any of the other terms that are thrown out there in the space around it, if you didn't have a plan, what are you being flexible with? It's just jelly at that point. And so having some structure, having the standards, having an idea of what the processes are, allows you then to, using old-fashioned terminology, branch and sequel into any number of different directions that you may need to go into. Otherwise, what are you flexing from? You may be out of the frying pan and into the fire if you really don't know what it is that you're supposed to be doing in the first place. That we can be too flexible in that how do we actually know that we're improving the situation at all if we don't understand the basics of what we're trying to do?
Right, then you're just becoming reactionary.
You're just reacting. That's
yeah,
exactly.
yeah, interesting. Well, we've got about 3 minutes left, so I want to give everybody an opportunity to sort of give us your final thoughts. Let us know what you're really wanting this audience to take away today. So Heidi, if you want to start and convey what what you really think is a pivotal takeaway for our audience today.
Well, number one, I like to say anybody that is doing this training in any fashion, if they're, picking the pieces they can do or doing the whole thing or however they're doing it, the first thing I would say is congrats, because you're investing in yourself and you're investing in your own development. And to me, then that is meaningful, because I always like to say that if you're not moving forward, then you're actually moving backward, because everybody else is still going forward. So congratulations for being here, number one. And I think that our profession is a very cool profession. Folks probably garner that by me telling them the books, the FAR and the other books and clauses that I like. So I'm just a huge advocate of training and education and all that we do. So I would love to continue the conversation with anybody.
Great, thank you, Heidi. William, any parting thoughts for our audience today?
I think I'd just like to reinforce the concept of innovation needs inspiration. I want to keep going, keep bringing that one home, capturing hearts and minds. The activity that we do from an acquisition perspective is not just paper and contract files and email files or Word documents or Excel spreadsheets. We're delivering value. Okay, so it is so much more than the artifacts that we create in our business. Our value is so much more than just the creation of artifacts. So continue to focus on the inspiration piece of it. We need you. Your country needs you. Your organization needs you. Your team needs you. So inspiration, inspiration, inspiration.
Great. Thank you so much. Ben, any final parting words?
I would say thank you for allowing us the time to spend with everyone today and as part of the overall conference. What a great job the partnership there with the Wright brothers and AFRL. What a good thing you guys are doing, and thank you for your service to all. From a standpoint of the discussion, keep working on trying to be more flexible. In today's world, where all the different demands, it seems like we're juggling snakes and spiders on a daily basis. It's just a matter of you're going to get bit. Which one's it going to be, and how bad is it going to be at the end of the day? And so, how do we deal with that? How do we move forward? Being flexible does not mean that we're going to abandon our standards and what it is to do a good job, but it's more about being open-minded and thinking about what we can do differently. And be ready to deal with the next thing that comes down the pipe for us. So again, thank you so much for.
We so appreciate everyone participating. This was a fantastic panel. And if anybody wants to follow up with our speakers today, please visit their speaker profiles. You can request a follow-up with them. Get in touch with them about their fantastic MBA program. I think it's going to be a great opportunity to connect some of our Air Force folks to that program. So again, thank you so much for participating, and stay tuned for the next session.